Explanation and purpose of the inverse function, and this is the biggie. The function f, hopefully that's big enough. Can you see that? Is that okay for you guys? F takes the domain to the range. And if I want to take a look at the picture, my college algebras, after a while, we draw these circles all the time. There's domain, there's the range. Here's x, here's y, and the function f picks up an x value and takes it to a y value. And that's what we've been doing up until now. We want a function that takes the range and returns it to the domain. It is the undo button that is the purpose of the inverse function. The inverse function will pick up the range, elements in the range, return it to the domain. So if I look at the picture once again, the function takes x to y, the inverse function of f will take the y's and return them to the x's. It's like a round-trip ticket. You get a round-trip ticket, and maybe it's from here to San Diego, and your return is from San Diego to here. So you have a plane that takes you from here to San Diego. You get on a plane that hopefully returns you to here and doesn't maybe stop off in Vegas along the way. It's the return trip ticket. It's the guy who brings it back. It's the undo button. We have seen undo buttons before. And if we have the function f of x equaling the square root of x, what's the undo button? G of x is who? What undoes a square root?
X squared.
X squared. These two guys are inverses of each other. It's the undo button. What undoes square root? Square. What undoes square? Square root. That's the purpose of the inverse function. It helps us solve equations. It undoes something that was done so we can solve for x. Now, inverses are kind of interesting because I don't look at x square root of x and x squared being inverses of each other until I have to say, well, in order to undo a square root, you need to use a square. But even then, I don't think I'm using the inverse because that's how I've always done it. But that's the purpose. Well, what about notation? The notation we use for F inverse is F to the minus 1 of x. You need to leave room because we're going to write around it. This is notation. It's the name of the function. So it's the name of the function. Then what's this guy? He's always the variable in the function. He's the variable in the function. It is notation. And when I look at this guy, we say F inverse of x. It's just notation. Now, F to the minus 1 of x is not equal to 1 over f of x. F to the minus 1 is just notation. Now, if I wanted that guy, 1 over f of x is equal to, you take the whole thing to the minus 1. Just notation. Now, inverses appear on your calculator. In that, if I take a look at the face of the calculator, and it's always true of any scientific calculator, if you look, here's the key right here, S, psi, n, that's sine, these are trigonometric functions, cosine, cos, and tan, tangent, sine, cosine, tangent. Notice what's above the key. Sine minus 1, cosine minus 1, tangent minus 1. They're the inverses of those functions. Here's something else that's extremely interesting. Back in the day, when scientific calculators first came out, there was not a second key, there was not an alpha key. There was a key that said INV on it. And when you did INV of x squared, you would get, look what's above the key, square root. We just said that square root and x squared are inverses of each other. Interesting. Look above this thing called log, what we're going to be doing. Above it is something called 10 to the x. They're inverses of each other. So when you did the INV and then hit that key, what you were picking up was the inverse of that function. Why? Because it didn't have all this other stuff on it. It just did the basics. But now because it does so much, above a lot of these keys, certainly angle's not the inverse of apps, right? So because the calculators do so much, the IMV key is now gone, replaced by the second key. And then, of course, now we have an alpha key that will actually give us letters as well. Kind of interesting. You've got a cheat sheet built into your calculator you're going to find that can help you with some stuff.